Well, hello everyone. Hello Phil. Hello Fred. I feel very badly that it took me this long to get back to you with my counter. I've had a very crazy week and a half. I do apologize. Phil, I enjoyed watching your opening statements, and I thought, unfortunately for me, they were very strong. I also enjoyed the Dear Prudence cover quite a bit. So I figured I would start out with a concession to one of your points, which is the bit about the swastika. The way I phrased my argument, you may have thought that Susie was the only one who wore that emblem, and as you point out, that was not the case. It has also been mentioned to me that in the UK there was something of a different kind of punk scene than in the US, arguably an angrier one. Now, I would still argue that the usage of the swastikas was rather different. Punks rebelled in all directions. They punched up, down, right, left. They rejected the hippies of their day. They rejected the government. They rejected traditional values. They rejected the idea of musical talent or accomplishment being a necessity for forming a band, or even that important. And they wanted to be very in your face about all of it. Susie was just as likely to go to a punk show topless and showing off her armpit hair as she was to wear a swastika, and she was willing to take the consequences for that. I cannot say that there's anything like that going on in conservatism. It's not even possible, I would argue. If punk can be said to mean anything, it goes against the sacred cows of society, against the status quo. It cannot be conservative by definition. I want to go through some of your points now. Tribalist signaling. These Kekistanis do like to signal their group membership, to the point of having their own flag and anthem. It makes me laugh how much they claim to be uber individualistic, when I don't think I've ever seen a group so lacking in any sense of individual expression. Not only are they ridiculously repetitive, they're inclined to dogpiling, which, to be honest, really ought to be called sheep piling, because I can't imagine a more herd-like behavior. In all seriousness, though, can you imagine a punk saluting a flag, even an ironic one, for very long? If these guys had been like punks, they would be all over this and moved on a long time ago, calling anyone hanging on to it a poser and a sellout. It's like that Ramones song, I'm an outsider, outside to everything. The second point, kicking against, as in kicking against the establishment. I somewhat went over this before. There was always a lot of punk songs against the government and the establishment and whatever, and that's a real fight, and not one these dudes are really interested in. They aren't fighting against Trump. They aren't against cops or capitalism or any of the big structures. They fight against women and minorities and trans people. I mean, for fuck's sake, it's pathetic. Let's be honest. Let me show you something.
Folks, this weekend, the National Policy Institute held its annual conference in the nation's capital. Their movement is broadly referred to as alt-right, but the positions they embrace are white nationalist, supremacist, and many say absolutely racist. Unlike past gatherings, this meeting was energized by the election of Donald Trump. Here is some of what took place at the conference this weekend.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory! No one will honor us for losing gracefully. No one mourns the great crimes committed against us. For us, it is conquer or die. To be white is to be a striver, a crusader, an explorer, and a conqueror. We build, we produce, we go upward. And we recognize the central lie of American race relations. We don't exploit other groups. We don't gain anything from their presence. They need us and not the other way around. We are not meant to live in shame and weakness and disgrace. We were not meant to beg for moral validation from some of the most despicable creatures to ever populate the planet. We were meant to overcome all of it, because that is natural and normal for us. America was, until this past generation, a white country designed for ourselves and our posterity. It is our creation. It is our inheritance, and it belongs to us.
Here's what President-elect Trump's staff had tweeted in response to that controversial video. Quote, President-elect Trump has continued to denounce racism of any kind, and he was elected because he will be a leader for every American. To think otherwise is a complete misrepresentation of the movement that united Americans from all backgrounds. There were protesters outside the conference, and the U.S. Holocaust Museum issued a statement that said, in part, quote, Richard Spencer, the leader of the National Policy Institute, made several direct and indirect references to Jews and other minorities, often alluding to Nazism. The targeting of Jews was central to Nazi racist ideology. The Germans attempted to kill every Jewish man, woman, and child they could find. Nazi racism extended to other groups. By the end of World War II, the Germans and the collaborators had murdered 6 million Jews and millions of other innocent civilians, many of whom were targeted for racial reasons. The Holocaust did not begin with killing, it began with words. The museum calls on all American citizens, our religious and civic leaders, and the leadership of all branches of the government to confront racist thinking and divisive, hateful speech. Joining us right now is Richard Spencer, who they were just referring to. So, Richard, we had you previously on TV One. Have you back? First and foremost, when you said despicable creatures, who were you talking about?
I was talking about the lying media that have actually been lying about me for the last 24 hours.
So when you say lying about you, what does that mean?
CNN claimed that I questioned whether Jews were people, things like that. We published the text of my speech. I did nothing of the kind. They're doing a wild exaggeration. They're worrying about fake news. They're engaging in fake news about me.
So why Heil Hitler there? Why the Nazi references? Why?
No one said Heil Hitler.
No, first of all, when we saw the video there were individuals there who were doing that. We've seen photos as well of individuals at that particular conference who were using the Nazi salute.
There's a lot of exuberance in events like this. There's also a lot of irony. The fact is...
Or the Nazi salute?
Yeah, in the sense when it's done in the context of the alt-right, it's done in a spirit of fun and exuberance.
But this is America.
Because whenever anyone sticks up for European identity, whenever they say, I want to stick up for us, for our people, they're always called a collection of names: Nazi, KKK, Southern Confederate, etc. I think a lot of people just want to throw it back in their enemies' faces.
That man there is Richard Spencer. He is using the same argument as the Kekastanis do. He's appropriating them. And it works. Because if they can be ironic, so can he. No one can prove what's in someone's mind, after all. We see this again and again. We've gone full post-truth over here. The Nazi salutes weren't Nazi salutes. The people cheering Sargon's rapey tweets at MythCon weren't cheering Sargon's rapey tweets. Those guys with the torches are some of them very good people. Yeah, right. What are you supposed to say? Now look at these two guys, the dude on the right especially. He is the banality of evil in the flesh. This little pissant. Mouthy Buddha, the other guy. He took this video down not long after his fashy friend here was arrested for attempted murder. And he and his brother and another friend were in a Jeep. They went up to some people peacefully protesting Richard Spencer's speech in Florida. The two of them encouraged the third, who had a gun, to shoot, which he did. He took a shot at the protesters. Didn't hit anyone, thankfully. They drove off, but they were picked up afterwards by the cops. Now this video, I've seen it, and as I said, Mouthy Buddha took it down. If I have to, most likely I can get it. One of the problems with dealing with the current political situation is that it can get genuinely scary to engage with some people. But having watched it, and if you're willing to take my word for it, I will report to you that they talked a good deal about Kekistan, which the fashy friend here was a big fan of. He thought it was a great gateway to his movement. And he's right. I've seen it happen, so I know. Now, does that mean that the people holding up the flag there and standing around are all fascist in this somewhat infamous picture at this point from VidCon? No, it doesn't. Now, I understand why, in the context of people dying, people being murdered for their skin color, or peacefully protesting, or sticking up to someone being an asshole to a young lady on a bus, or for going to a mosque to pray, I understand why a lot of people are sick to death of the useful idiots who are letting themselves be played by white nationalists. Well-funded, slick, armed to the teeth white nationalists. And I understand why people have started deciding that the line between actual Nazi and water carrier for Nazis is not that big of a line and not that important to try to figure out. And particularly with the more conservative types, it's not like there's no overlap, you know? It's not that far to go from I'm an anti-feminist who thinks that white men are the group most picked on in society to white genocide, and we need to do something about that. It's a little too cozy, these ideas. And if you're gonna go out and make the same arguments as Tucker Carlson or Rush Limbaugh would, call yourself punks? Nah. My favorite guy in this photo is the one all the way on the right. I don't know who he is, but he's got a look on his face like he just realized that being in this photo with its slightly modified Nazi flag, but it's green, people, so get it? Funny stuff. Anyway, he has that look like this is so going to come back and bite me right in the ass. And it does remind me of hair metal in its way. Not as seriously in some cases, but for instance, you may remember Warrant, another one of these practically interchangeable bands, much as we now have practically interchangeable Skeptics TM. They did a song called Cherry Pie, which was really pretty juvenile, sexist, dumb. The singer, the late Janie Lane, did it for the money and regretted it quite a bit later. He said, "I hate that song. My legacy is cherry pie. Everything about me is cherry pie. I'm the cherry pie guy. I could shoot myself in the fucking head for writing that song." And later on, he came to terms with it. Though, of course, when he died, he was proved right, because Cherry Pie is a song everyone brought up. It's one thing, though, regretting a dumb song. Nowadays, you gotta be smarter than this. This isn't about rebellion anymore. It's gone too far. To paraphrase an old movie quote, when your teenage angst bullshit starts racking up a body count, it's time to grow up a little bit. This is the problem with the platforming debate. When Milo Yiannopoulos was going around on his dangerous faggot tour, he was, as we now know conclusively, not an honest interlocutor. At the time, though, he was causing a lot of problems, and he was doing it intentionally because he didn't care who got hurt. He cared about getting attention. Whenever people seemed like they were starting to bore of his shtick, he just raised the ante. So when just showing up didn't cause dangerousness anymore, he moved on to doxing. Then, of course, it just got worse after that. People were getting shot and stabbed, and riots were breaking out, and he loved it. He reveled in it. And people talk about the marketplace of ideas, but like most fascists, he didn't have many ideas. And the ones he did have, he was denying anyway. But he would have kept on until somebody died. It certainly doesn't stop Richard Spencer that the events he organizes lead to actual and attempted bloodshed, and he doesn't care about convincing anyone of anything by debate. He's an incrementalist. Move that Overton window just enough. Just give people the idea that his opinion is just an opinion. And why are you against people with different opinions, you terrible person, right? And I've said this before. Look, if I'm talking to you and I start a conversation about my opinion that we should, our buddy Dave, we should probably murder him. Dave's been dragging us down, holding us back. We may all just be better off. All of us, really. Well, maybe we don't have to kill him. Maybe we can make him leave the country somehow. But, if that can't happen, if he won't just voluntarily leave, well, obviously living in the same country as Dave is a non-starter, so we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. If I start talking like that about Dave, people get that's not an opinion, that's not an idea. But we are such foolish little hairless apes, and when the numbers get bigger, we can't wrap our brains around them so good no more. Dave we get. If I add to that Dave's family, his wife Ruth, his kids, okay, we get that. But once we start talking about a population, genocide, that gets beyond us. It starts to become an abstraction. But it's not an abstraction. It's just an awful lot of Daves and Ruths and kids, millions of them. One last point of yours I wanted to touch upon. The question of not being outraged. Now, one, you can't always choose your emotions, and you're certainly not going to get all the passionately political young people out there to just chill out and relax, even if you desperately wanted to. And anyway, I honestly think it's a waste of time trying to play to these individuals by their rules, because their rules just change on you. You will never do anything right by them. If you don't argue their points, it's because you're scared. And if you do, it's because you're obsessed. If you're emotional, by their measurement, by the way, I'm frequently told I'm emotional when I'm not, and have literally said nothing about feelings, and I'm sitting behind a computer, and it's not like they could see, But they'll just tell you you're emotional, you're quote-unquote triggered. And that's, of course, terrible and bad. And if you try to correct for that by being very cold and logical in your speech, well, then you're condescending. And apparently that's just as bad. There's not a single march or activist move or event they've ever approved of. The Women's March was too warm and fuzzy. Kaepernick is unpatriotic and insulting the troops. Of course they aren't going to like Antifa, etc., etc., etc. You'll tie yourself in knots and tick off your allies with your tone policing. It's a distraction technique. That's all it is. Don't let them distract from the point. That's what they are really trying to do. I say, look, you can be emotional and right. You can be perfectly calm and perfectly wrong. Be logical, stick to the argument at hand. And then I bring it right back to that. Never let them turn the conversation to something else until the main topic has been dealt with and everybody's clear on the resolution of that. If nothing else, it annoys them. Speaking of teenage rebellion, though, have you noticed that a lot of these guys aren't teens? Some of them are, sure, well, in their 20s, but I am not convinced that this is a youth movement, and it's certainly not a youth-led movement. Alex Jones, Carl Benjamin, Stefan Molyneux, Jordan Peterson. These guys are a lot of things, but they are not the youth gone wild. I wanted to talk more about Jordan, but I begin to feel like I've gone on way too long, and if I start on him. But yeah, he and his AI website where he targets all the corrupted postmodern neo-Marxists out there, or that thing a couple of weeks before that, where he doxed 2 students, a professor, targeting students. Really, it's just what I was talking about with Milo or Spencer. None of these authoritarian bastards care about the safety and well-being of their fellow human being, and they don't rein themselves in. So that means it's up to us. Like CPAC kicking Milo out or his book deal getting scuttled. Like the teachers complaining about Jordan Peterson's website to the dean or to the university that he worked at. It's only when they face consequences that they begin to stop themselves. And that's just for the ones who even do it then. For many of them, even after that, they just keep on going. But we as a society have to give them those consequences and keep them from taking too many people down with them, because that's all that we can do. Well, thanks, Phil. And thank you, Phil and Fred, for your patience with me. I do get that this is a downer of a way to end this, so here's a little something I hope you'll like. Anyway, I'll talk to you soon. Bye!
She's my cherry pie. Cool drink of water, such a sweet surprise. Tastes so good, make a grown man cry. Sweet cherry pie.
Swinging on the front porch, swinging on the lawn, swinging where we want, cause there ain't nobody home. Swing it to the left and swing it to the right. If I think about baseball, I'ma swing it all night.
I scream,
You scream, you'll scream for her. Don't even try, cause you can't ignore her.
she's my cherry pie. Cool drink of water, such a sweet surprise. Tastes so good, make a grown man cry. Sweet cherry pie.
Swinging in the living room, swinging in the kitchen. Most people don't, cause they're too busy bitching. Swinging in there, cause she wanted me to feed her. So I mixed up the batter and she licked the beater.
And I scream,
You scream, you'll scream for her. Don't even try, cause you can't ignore her.
she's my cherry pie. Cool drink of water, such a sweet surprise. Tastes so good, make a grown man cry. Sweet cherry pie. She's my cherry pie. Put a smile on your face, 10 miles wide. Looks so good, bring a tear to your eye. Sweet cherry pie. Swing it. Swing it in the bathroom.
Swinging on the floor, swinging so hard we forgot to lock the door.
In walks a daddy, 6'4".
Said you ain't gonna swing with my daughter no more.
She's my cherry pie. Cool drink of water, such a sweet surprise. Tastes so good, make a grown man cry. Sweet cherry pie. She's my cherry pie. Put a smile on your face, 10 miles here